The father's justice. My name is William Carter, and at 55, I thought I understood what loyalty meant, what family meant, what a lifetime of building something together was supposed to lead to. But that illusion shattered the moment my wife's will was read aloud. We were sitting in Richard Blake's office, the same office where Susan and I had signed contracts, planned investments, built a future piece by piece. And now, it felt like a courtroom where I was being quietly erased. Logan sat across from me, my son, flipping through the pages of the will with a kind of impatience that didn't belong in a moment like this. His fingers moved fast, too fast, like he wasn't grieving, just calculating. Then he stopped. "A beach cabin?" he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. Then, amusement. "You're kidding me." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching him. "Dad gets some rotting shack by the ocean," Logan continued, leaning back with a dry laugh. "And I get the villa in Italy?" He shook his head slowly, like the whole thing was some kind of joke designed just for him. Wow, even in death, Mom knew who deserved what. The words didn't come out loud, not right away, but they landed hard. Richard cleared his throat, trying to steady the room. "Your mother made very specific decisions, Logan. The cabin at Driftwood Lane is fully paid off. No debts, no liens." Logan let out a short, mocking breath. "Great. So Dad can go live with seagulls and mold. Sounds like a dream retirement." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just something heavier. Something colder. I had spent decades building everything we owned. Long days. Longer nights. Solving problems no one else wanted to touch. And yet, sitting there, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. Richard slid a set of keys across the desk toward me. "This belongs to you now, William." The metal was cold when I picked it up. Logan was already standing. "Well, this has been enlightening," he said, straightening his jacket. "I've got a flight to catch. The villa isn't going to evaluate itself." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dad?" He turned slightly, just enough for me to see the edge in his eyes. "You should probably start packing. I'm listing the house this week." The room went quiet. "This is my home too, Logan," I said, my voice lower than I expected, steady but strained. "Not anymore," he replied without hesitation. "Mom left it to me, along with everything that actually matters." There was no hesitation in him, no doubt, no trace of the boy I used to know. "You've got 48 hours. And just like that, he was gone. No goodbye, no second glance. Just the sound of the door closing, and the realization that in a single afternoon I had lost my wife, my home, and the son I thought I had raised right. That night, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because anything had changed physically, the same walls, the same furniture, the same quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, but because every corner now carried a different weight. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes Logan had already ordered, like the decision had been made long before I even heard the words. 30 years. That's how long Susan and I had lived here, built something from nothing, piece by piece. I could still remember the first night we moved in. No curtains, no proper furniture, just a mattress on the floor and 2 folding chairs we borrowed from a neighbor. She had laughed that night, a real laugh, the kind that made everything feel possible. I hadn't heard that laugh in a long time. I picked up a box and started placing things inside, slowly, carefully, like the way you handle something fragile, even when it's already broken. Most of what mattered wasn't even mine to take. The china set her mother had given us, the antique cabinet she loved, even the photo frames lining the hallway. All of it already tagged for removal. Logan hadn't wasted time. I paused in front of one picture, our wedding day. Susan in white, me in a rented suit that didn't quite fit right, both of us smiling as we had just won something bigger than money. I ran my thumb across the glass, trying to remember when that feeling had started to fade, when the distance between us had quietly grown into something I didn't even recognize until it was too late. Had she already decided back then that I wasn't enough? That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. By morning, the movers had arrived. They moved through the house like I wasn't even there, lifting, wrapping, carrying away decades of my life with mechanical precision. No one asked what I wanted to keep. No one needed to. Logan had made those decisions already. I kept my things simple. Clothes, a few tools, books I had bought with my own money, things Susan never cared about. Everything else, I was left behind. Not because I didn't want it, but because it didn't feel like mine anymore. By noon, I was standing in the driveway. The truck engine was running, but I hadn't moved yet. I just sat there, looking at the house, the place where I thought I would grow old, where I believed I would be remembered, not erased. 30 years, reduced to a few boxes in the back of a pickup. I gripped the steering wheel, not out of anger, but to keep myself steady, because somewhere between the silence of that house and the cold finality of Logan's words, I had to face something I never thought I would have to admit. I hadn't just lost my home. I had lost the life I believed was real. The drive to the coast took a little over 2 hours, but it felt longer than that. Like every mile was stretching something inside me I hadn't had time to process. I kept my eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, the old pickup humming beneath me as it had done for years. Reliable, predictable, everything my life had been, until yesterday. I hadn't even known Susan owned property out here. That thought kept circling back, quiet but persistent. How do you spend 30 years with someone, share a home, a bank account, a life, and still not know something like this? The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Susan wasn't careless. She planned everything, down to the smallest detail. Which meant, if she kept this from me, she had a reason. Driftwood Lane wasn't hard to find, just a narrow strip of sand cutting toward the shoreline, lined with a mix of houses that didn't quite belong together. Some were polished, expensive, the kind of places people escape to. Others looked like they had been left behind years ago, surrendered to salt air and time. Number 127 sat closer to the second group. I slowed the truck as I pulled up, tires crunching softly over sand and loose gravel. What used to be a driveway was barely visible now, overtaken by weeds and wind-blown debris. The cabin itself looked like it had been fighting a losing battle for decades. The blue paint had faded into a dull gray, peeling in long strips. The porch sagged slightly to one side, and several windows were boarded up like someone had tried to shut the world out. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a moment. This is what she left me, I muttered under my breath. Not bitter, just trying to understand. But something didn't sit right. I had seen abandoned structures before, plenty of them during my years in construction. You learn to read the signs, the way time leaves its mark. And this place, for all its wear, didn't feel completely forgotten. There were no broken glass shards scattered across the ground, no obvious signs of forced entry, no wild overgrowth creeping through every crack. Even the front steps, though weathered, were clear enough to walk on without pushing anything aside. I stepped out of the truck, the air thick with salt and the distant sound of waves rolling in. It should have smelled like decay, like damp wood and neglect. But it didn't. There was something else, faint, barely there, but noticeable if you paid attention. Clean, not fresh, not new, but not abandoned either. I walked toward the front door slowly, each step more deliberate than the last. The key Richard had given me felt heavier now in my hand, like it carried more than just access, like it was opening something I wasn't prepared for. The closer I got, the stronger that feeling became. This place wasn't what it was supposed to be. And whatever Susan had hidden here, it hadn't been left behind. The key turned too easily. That was the first thing that felt wrong. For a place that was supposed to be abandoned, forgotten, left to decay under years of salt and wind, the lock didn't resist. It didn't scrape or jam or complain the way old metal usually does. It just turned, smooth, quiet, like someone had used it recently. I pushed the door open slowly, expecting the usual rush of stale air, mold, rot, something that would match the story I'd been told. But instead, I stopped breathing. Lavender. Faint, almost delicate, but unmistakable. I stood there in the doorway for a moment, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I had expected. The light filtered in through the windows, soft and even, landing on a living room that didn't look abandoned at all. The furniture was old, yes, worn around the edges, but it was clean, not a layer of dust in sight. A pale blue throw blanket was folded neatly over the back of the couch, not tossed, not forgotten, placed, intentional. There were fresh flowers on the coffee table, simple, arranged in a mason jar. I stepped closer, almost hesitant, and reached out to touch one of the petals. Soft, not dried, not artificial, fresh. Someone had been here. Recently. I set my toolbox down without realizing I was holding it tighter than I should. The hardwood floor creaked under my boots, but even that sound felt contained. The floor had been swept. No sand tracked in from outside, no debris, nothing that suggested neglect. I moved toward the kitchen, slower now, more aware of everything around me. The sink was empty. Dishes sat neatly in a drying rack, 2 plates, 2 cups, silverware, arranged carefully on a folded towel. Not stacked in a hurry, not left overnight, but placed like someone had just finished and walked away. The refrigerator hummed softly when I opened it. It was plugged in. Inside, there wasn't much, but enough to tell a story. A carton of milk, expired just a few days ago. A sealed container of soup. A small pack of crackers. Basic things, the kind you keep when you're actually living somewhere, not just passing through. And then I saw them. Medications, lined up along the top shelf. Organized. Dated. Prescribed. I picked one up, reading the label slowly, my fingers tightening around the bottle as the name registered. Hannah Cruz. Not Susan. Not Carter. Cruz. I closed the fridge carefully, more aware now that I wasn't alone in this story, that this place belonged to someone else. The living room suddenly felt different. Not empty. Occupied. I turned back slowly, my eyes scanning the space again, this time not as a visitor, but as someone trying to understand what had been happening here, right under my nose, for how long. I couldn't even begin to guess, because this wasn't an abandoned cabin. It was a home, someone's home. And the deeper realization settled in, heavy, unavoidable. Susan hadn't left me something worthless. She had left me something hidden. I was still standing in the living room, trying to make sense of everything, when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, careful, just outside the porch. My body tensed instinctively. Every instinct I had told me to stay still, to listen. The sound of a plastic bag rustling. Then the faint scrape of a key sliding into the lock from the outside. Someone else had a key. The door opened slowly, and she stepped in. She didn't see me at first. Smaller than I expected, moving with measured, deliberate steps, supported by a pair of forearm crutches. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely, and she wore simple clothes, practical, as she had just come from an appointment. There was something fragile about her, not weak, but careful. Like every movement, had been learned the hard way. Hannah, she called softly, her voice carrying a kind of quiet warmth. I brought the crackers you like. The doctor said your appetite might. She stopped. Her eyes lifted and found me sitting there. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her expression shifted quickly. Surprise first, then confusion, then something else. Something deeper, like recognition, trying to surface. You're William, she said finally. Not a question. A statement. I felt my throat tighten. How do you know who I am? She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her with care, as if sudden movements might break something fragile between us. She set the bag down on the table, then lowered herself into the chair across from me, adjusting her crutches with practiced ease. "Hannah told me you might come someday," she said gently. The name hit me again. Hannah. Not Susan. Not Carter. "Hannah?" I repeated, trying to steady my voice. "Who are you?" She gave a small, almost apologetic smile, the kind that carried more sadness than comfort. "My name is Hannah Cruz," she said, "and this is my home." The words didn't make sense. "This place belongs to my wife," I replied, sharper than I intended. "Susan Carter. She left it to me." Hannah nodded slowly, like she had expected that reaction. "She didn't leave it to you because it was hers," she said softly. "She left it to you because she wanted you to find me." I stared at her, trying to understand, trying to find something in her face that would explain what I was missing. "That doesn't explain anything," I said. "Why were you living with my wife? And why didn't I know about any of this?" Her gaze didn't waver. "She wasn't living with me," Hannah said quietly. "She was visiting." The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had shifted closer. "She bought this place for me 4 years ago," Hannah continued. "She's been coming here ever since." I shook my head instinctively. "That's not possible. We didn't have that kind of money." "She used her inheritance," Hannah said, "the one she told you she donated." That landed harder than anything else so far. Silence stretched between us, thick, heavy, filled with questions I didn't even know how to ask yet. And then she said it. The one thing that changed everything. "She was afraid of how you'd react when you found out who I really am." I leaned forward slowly, my hands gripping my knees, my voice barely above a whisper. "And who is that?" Hannah looked at me, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with a quiet kind of acceptance. "I'm her daughter, William." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The words didn't fit into anything I knew, anything I believed about my life, my marriage, the woman I had spent 30 years beside. "I'm her daughter, William." It echoed in my head. Sharp. Impossible. "That's not true," I said immediately, too quickly, as if I rejected it fast enough, it would disappear. "Susan never had another child. We would have known. I would have known." Hannah didn't argue. She just reached for a manila envelope on the table beside her, her movements slow but certain, like she had done this before in her mind 100 times. She pulled out a document and held it toward me. "Then read this." My hands hesitated before taking it. A birth certificate. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than ink and official stamps. My eyes moved across the lines. Name, date, place of birth. Hannah Cruz. And then, mother. Susan Carter. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the paper, forcing myself to keep reading, to make sense of something that refused to make sense. "She had me when she was 17, Hannah said quietly. "Her parents threatened to cut her off if she kept me. No money, no support, nothing. So she gave me up." Each word landed slowly, deliberately, like pieces of a truth that had been buried for decades. "She never stopped looking for me," Hannah continued. "She hired a private investigator years ago, but it took time, a long time. She found me 4 years ago. I too. 4 years. 4 years of my life. Of our marriage. And I had never known." "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking despite everything I was trying to hold together. "Why keep something like this a secret?" Hannah's expression softened, but there was sadness in it. "Because she was ashamed," she said, "not just of giving me up, but of lying to you, about the money, about where she was going, about everything." I looked down at the document again, at the name I had never seen before, and suddenly, memories started shifting, rearranging themselves. The late nights, the unexplained trips, the distance that had grown between us without explanation. "She used her inheritance to buy this place," Hannah said gently. "She told you she donated it to charity, but she used it to take care of me instead." My chest tightened. "She said you were a good man," Hannah added, "that you deserved honesty, but she didn't know how to give it to you without breaking everything." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. my eyes drifting around the cabin again, seeing it differently now. The clean floors, the careful arrangement, the quiet warmth. This wasn't just a place she had visited. This was where she had come to be someone else. A mother. She came here every week, Hannah continued, sometimes more, especially when I got worse. She helped with my treatments, my bills, things my insurance didn't cover. She made sure I was okay. And I never knew, I whispered. The realization cut deeper than anger. It wasn't just that she had a daughter. It was that she had built an entire second life, one filled with purpose, connection, something I hadn't seen in her for years. And before she died, Hannah said softly, reaching behind the couch, she left something for you. She placed a small wooden box in front of me. I recognized it instantly. I had made it in high school, given it to Susan when we first started dating. I hadn't seen it in decades. I assumed it was gone, thrown away like so many other things. She kept it, Hannah said. She said it reminded her of when things were simple, when you believed in forever. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. All written in Susan's careful handwriting. The top one was dated just weeks before she died. And as I held it there, staring at my own name written by a woman I thought I knew, I realized something that hit harder than any betrayal. I had never really known her at all. My hands were still shaking when I unfolded the first letter. The paper was thin, familiar, the kind Susan always used, but it felt heavier now, like it carried everything she had never said out loud. My dearest William. I had to stop for a second. Just seeing those words, written in her hand, after everything I had just learned, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like something unfinished, something that had waited too long. If you're reading this, then you've met Hannah, and you finally know the truth. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep going. There are things I should have told you years ago, things I wanted to tell you every single day, but I was afraid. Afraid. Susan, afraid of me? I kept reading. The cancer came back. The words blurred for a moment, my vision catching up to what my mind refused to accept. 2 years ago, more aggressive than before, the doctors gave me options, experimental treatments, limited chances, and I chose to take them here. Here. This cabin. This life I had never seen. I didn't tell you, because I couldn't bear to watch you go through it again. My chest tightened. 15 years ago, I had sat beside her through every appointment, every treatment, every night she thought she wouldn't make it. I had held her when she cried, when she was too weak to stand, when she lost pieces of herself I didn't know how to replace. We had survived that together. Or at least, I thought we had. She said you would break if you had to relive that pain, Hannah whispered quietly, as if she could hear the silence forming around me. I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering the hospital lights, the smell of antiseptic, the way Susan used to squeeze my hand when the pain got too much. And all this time, she had been going through it again, alone. I came here not just to be with Hannah, but because the medical center nearby offered a treatment I couldn't get anywhere else. Each line felt like a step deeper into something I couldn't escape. I wanted to tell you. Every day I wanted to tell you. But every time I tried, I saw the way you looked at me back then, and I couldn't do it to you again. I let out a slow breath, one that didn't feel like relief, just weight leaving my chest in pieces. It wasn't just the illness. It was the choice. She had chosen to carry that burden alone, to build a second life where she could face it without hurting me, without watching me fall apart the way I had before. I know this means I lived 2 lives, one with you and one I never showed you. That line stayed with me. 2 lives. One I thought I understood, and one that had been unfolding just beyond my reach, quietly, deliberately, without me ever noticing. I'm sorry, William, not just for the lies, but for the distance you must have felt without knowing why. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands still unsteady. All those nights I thought she was just tired. All those times she seemed somewhere else. It hadn't been indifference. It had been painful. and she had carried it in silence, believing she was protecting me while I stood there, blind to everything that mattered most. "She didn't want you to remember her like that," Hannah said softly. "Not sick, not fading, just the way she used to be." I nodded, but it didn't make it easier, because the truth settled in slowly, heavier than anything before it. I hadn't just lost my wife. I had lost the chance to stand beside her when she needed me most. I sat there with Susan's letter still open in my hands, trying to hold on to what was left of her voice, when my eyes fell to the next paragraph. "You need to know the truth about Logan." Something in the way she wrote his name, careful, almost distant, made my chest tighten. 3 months ago, the bank contacted me to confirm a loan I had never agreed to. I frowned, already sensing where this was going, but not ready for how far it would reach. The documents showed my signature, but it wasn't mine. I looked up at Hannah instinctively. She was already watching me, her expression quiet, like she knew exactly what I was about to read. I hired a private investigator to find out what happened. My grip on the letter tightened. What he found broke something in me I didn't know could still break. The words slowed, heavier now, each one landing with a weight I couldn't ignore. Logan had been forging signatures, not just mine, but yours as well. I felt something cold spread through my chest. "That's not possible," I said under my breath. But the letter didn't stop. "He accessed your accounts in small amounts over time, careful enough that you wouldn't notice, but it adds up." Add. Hannah reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward me. "You should see it," she said gently. I opened it slowly. Bank statements, withdrawal records, signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. Amounts that didn't seem large at first glance. A few thousand here, a few more there, spread out just enough to avoid attention. Until I saw the total. $97,000. Money I had spent decades saving, planning for the years when I wouldn't be able to work anymore. Gone. And I hadn't even noticed. My jaw tightened. Not in anger, not yet, but in something deeper. Something that felt like realization catching up too late. "He didn't stop there," Hannah said quietly. I turned back to the letter. "The villa he inherited, it's already gone, William." I blinked. "What do you mean, gone?" I muttered. "He took out a loan, $850,000, using forged documents that made it appear I had co-signed." The number hit like a physical blow. $850,000. "The property isn't worth that much anymore," the letter continued. "The market dropped. Environmental issues. The villa might cover half, if he's lucky." I leaned back slowly, the pieces starting to connect, whether I wanted them to or not. He owes the rest to a private lender. Not a bank. Not a company with policies and paperwork. A private lender. The kind that doesn't send reminders. The kind that sends people. He's not just in debt, he's in danger. I let out a breath that felt more like something breaking loose inside me. "And all of this," I whispered, staring at the numbers again, "all of this happened while he was living under my roof." Hannah nodded slightly. "He has a gambling problem," she said. "Your wife found out months before she passed." I closed my eyes briefly, remembering the late nights Logan claimed he was working. The sudden urgency in his voice when he talked about money. The way he avoided certain conversations altogether. It hadn't been ambition. It had been desperation. "And he knew about the cancer," I said slowly, the realization forming before I even finished the sentence. Hannah didn't answer right away, but she didn't need to. "He used it as justification," she said finally. "He thought, if she didn't have much time left, the money didn't matter." Something inside me went still. Not anger. Not shocked. Just stillness. The kind that comes when the truth is too complete to argue with. My son hadn't just made mistakes. He had calculated them, chosen them, repeated them, and all the while, he had stood in front of me, looking me in the eye, pretending to be someone I thought I knew. I opened my eyes again, staring at the evidence spread across the table. The signatures, the numbers, the proof. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a phase. This was who Logan had become. And for the first time, I understood something Susan had already known. This wasn't just about money. It was about how far someone could fall when they stopped seeing their own family as anything more than something to use. I thought I had reached the end of what Susan had left behind. The truth about Hannah, the truth about Logan, the pieces of a life I had never fully seen. But then I turned the page. The cabin is not what it appears to be. I frowned slightly, my eyes scanning the next lines more carefully now. The entire coastal area has been approved for redevelopment. The state is acquiring the properties for a marine research facility. I felt my grip tighten. This cabin, Hannah's home, has already been evaluated. My eyes moved faster now, catching the number before I even had time to process it. Estimated value, $1.4 million. I stopped breathing. For a moment, I thought I had read it wrong. I looked again. $1,400,000. The same place Logan had laughed at, dismissed, reduced to nothing more than a rotting shack by the ocean. It was worth more than anything he had taken. I let out a slow breath, the kind that doesn't bring relief, just clarity. She knew, I whispered. Hannah nodded. She arranged everything before she passed, she said. The sale is already scheduled. I looked down at the letter again, my mind racing ahead of the words. $900,000 will go directly to Hannah, Susan had written. Enough to cover her medical care. For life. I glanced at Hannah, really looked at her this time, not as a stranger, not as a secret, but as someone Susan had chosen to protect, above everything else. And the remaining $500,000, I read slowly, belongs to you, William. The room felt quieter somehow, like everything had settled into place. But then, there's a reason I didn't tell you any of this while I was alive. I knew that reason before I finished the sentence. Because you would have tried to help Logan. I closed my eyes briefly. She wasn't wrong. If you had known about the money, you would have felt obligated to save him, and he would have taken everything, just like before. The words didn't feel like an accusation. They felt like understanding. Complete, painful, accurate understanding. So I made sure he would never have access to it. I opened my eyes again, my attention sharpening. I created a structure that protects what's left of this family, even from itself. Hannah reached for another document, sliding it toward me across the table. A trust, she said softly. I picked it up, scanning the details, legal language, conditions, safeguards built into every line. Logan's debts will be paid, Susan had written, but not by giving him money. My eyes moved quickly now, piecing together what she had done. The funds are to be transferred directly to the creditors, through the trust, under the supervision of Richard Blake. No access, no control, no second chance to misuse it. He gets nothing, I said quietly. Hannah didn't correct me. He gets a chance, she replied instead, not money. I looked back at the letter. He will be required to enter a residential treatment program, Susan had written. If he completes it and proves he has changed, the trust will provide a controlled monthly allowance. I leaned back slowly, absorbing it all. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was precision. Every outcome accounted for. Every weakness anticipated. Every path forward, carefully controlled. She knew exactly what he would do, I said. She knew who he had become, Hannah replied. Silence settled between us again, but this time, it wasn't confusion. It was a realization. Susan hadn't just left behind answers. She had built something deliberate, unbreakable. A final act that did what she couldn't do in life. Protect her daughter, secure my future, and force our son to face the consequences he had spent years avoiding. And for the first time since I walked into that cabin, I understood. Nothing she left behind was accidental. Not the cabin, not the money, not even the timing. It was all a plan. and Logan Carter had already walked straight into it. The call came just as Susan said it would. Logan's name lit up my screen, and for a moment, I just stared at it, knowing exactly what waited on the other side. I answered, "Dad, I need your help." His voice wasn't confident anymore. Not sharp, not dismissive, just scared. "There's been a mistake with the villa. Some company is saying I owe them money. A lot of money. They're threatening to take everything." I leaned back slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough. "How much, Logan?" $850,000. The same number. The same lie he had tried to bury. "And you didn't sign anything?" I asked. "No. I mean, someone must have forged it. I swear, Dad, I didn't." "Come to the cabin," I said calmly. "Tonight. Bring every document you have." He didn't hesitate. Okay, I'll be there." When he arrived, just after sunset, he looked nothing like the man who had stood in that office days ago. His clothes were wrinkled, his hands unsteady, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Fear had replaced arrogance. "Dad, thank God," he said as soon as he stepped inside. "You have to help me. These people, they're not normal lenders. They're serious." I gestured toward the chair. "Sit down, Logan." He obeyed immediately, clutching his folder like it was the only thing keeping him together. "I brought everything," he said quickly. "We can figure this out together, like we always do." I opened Susan's box, slowly, deliberately, and placed the documents on the table between us. "My retirement account," I said. $97,000. Can you explain that?" His face drained of color. I was going to pay it back." "And the signatures?" I continued. "Mine and your mother's?" He didn't answer, because he couldn't. I slid the investigator's photos forward, the bank, the documents, his face clearly visible in every frame. "Stop lying, Logan." The room went still. For a moment, he looked like he might try again, but then something in him broke. "I needed the money," he said quietly. "I was in trouble." "So you stole from your family." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "I didn't think it would get this bad." I reached for Susan's final letter. "She knew," I said, "everything." His head snapped up. "What do you mean?" I read it out loud, every word, every detail, every truth he thought he had hidden. When I finished, he didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at the table, finally understanding that there was nothing left to deny. "Your debts are already taken care of," I said. His eyes lifted instantly, hope flashing across his face. "You paid them?" "No," I replied calmly. "She did." Relief flooded his expression. Until I continued. "But not for you." Confusion replaced it. "The money goes directly to the creditors, through a trust. You never touch a single dollar." "What about the rest?" he asked quickly. "My share." "There is no share." The words landed exactly where they needed to. "You get one thing, Logan." He stared at me, waiting. "A chance." I slid the final document toward him. "A residential treatment program. Mandatory. You complete it, you prove you've changed, and the trust will give you a controlled allowance." His hands trembled as he picked it up. "And if I don't?" I held his gaze. "Then the debts stay, and you deal with the consequences yourself." Silence. Heavy, final, unavoidable. For the first time, Logan Carter had no leverage, no manipulation left, no one to blame but himself. And slowly, painfully, he nodded. 3 months later, things looked different. Hannah had a home, safe, stable, a future that was finally her own. I had a small place nearby, quiet, honest, mine. And Logan? He stayed. In treatment. One day at a time. Not perfect, not forgiven, but trying. And maybe that was the only thing that mattered. Because in the end, money doesn't destroy families. Choices do. Money just reveals them. Sometimes, the greatest act of justice isn't punishment. It's forcing someone to face who they've become, and giving them one last chance to change it. So tell me, if you were in my place, Would you have saved him or let him fall?